On 1+1, Peace in the Middle East, Edward de Bono delivers his solution and the values driving President Barack Obama. Hello, I'm Jane Hutchin. Welcome to the program. Behind the polished image of a president taking the helm in world diplomacy, Barack Obama is in serious political trouble. His administration is set to be punished by Conservative voters at the forthcoming midterm congressional elections, and even the left has soured. So what's gone wrong? David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker magazine, recently published a biography of Obama called The Bridge. He's been speaking to Michael Maher in New York.
So David Remnick, welcome to 1+1. The 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, has certainly had many words written about him. He's written a few himself and 2 best-selling books. Well, what motivated you to write a book about him?
Well, you're right. He wrote a memoir, but a memoir is a story that you tell about yourself. It's not journalism. It's not going out and getting the full range of sources. Journalism is putting pressure, in fact, on stories that you tell about yourself. So while that book was very effective and appealing, and I think a big part of his appeal, it's not real history. I'm not suggesting for a second that he's lying, but it's a story that he tells about himself. It's very different from writing a biography or really in-depth journalism.
Now, your book is called The Bridge. Of course, that refers to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, where one of the seminal events of the Civil Rights Movement took place back in 1965. What is the connection to The Bridge? Why did you choose that title?
Well, I chose the title because the book opens at the Edmund Pettus Bridge many, many years later, right at the beginning of the presidential campaign. And Obama and Hillary Clinton both, who were going to face off in one of the most dramatic election campaigns in the history of the United States, went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge at the reenactment of this great event called Bloody Sunday, which is a very violent event in the civil rights movement. It's the first time that Barack Obama really appeals to the African American population of the United States. To have an African American become the president in a country where race is the primal wound, it's the incendiary element in our national saga. To see this happen is an extraordinary transformation. Now, it's something that we don't talk about much today. We talk about the economy, we talk about our failures in Afghanistan, we talk about much else, but race is something that is not at the center of the discussion. During the campaign, it was the either subliminal or overt element that was there all the time.
Why is that? Why do people in this country not talk about race?
Well, we talk about it when it kind of pops up as a crisis. But we very rarely talk about it in terms of the incredible incarceration rates among African American males, or the inequality in income or in education. These are issues that gnaw at us, but they're enormously complex. They are not the same issues as the issues of access in the 50s and the 60s that were at the center of the civil rights movement. They're more complicated. They're far more difficult to solve in many ways. And yet, you're absolutely right, we don't talk about them much.
How do you think the president has fared in terms of facing up to this issue? He's only been in office a very short time, and he's been on he has many things on his plate. But you don't think it's a priority?
I don't think it's been a priority with them, because I think they think that the great racial triumph of this administration historically will be, and inarguably is, the very fact of his election.
But is that enough?
And the fact that, well, it's not everything, but it is a lot. Let's not forget that it is a lot. And I don't think you can be a 10-year-old kid and have it be lost on you that your horizon of possibility is now limitless. But remember where he is. Remember where he started. On the brink of an economic depression, 2 wars, an automobile industry, a massive automobile industry about to fall apart, and on and on and on. And he has achieved a lot. It may not seem like a lot in Europe and elsewhere, in Australia, the idea that we have near national health care now, but that's an enormous gain. He just passed financial regulations through the Senate and the House. That is a very, very big deal. There's been a lot of legislative activity that's been progressive and successful, and yet Obama's gotten very little political credit for it. He is in deep political trouble.
How quickly his critics have jumped on him, given what he inherited as a president.
Well, I think
Two wars,
yeah.
an economy on the verge of collapse.
Well, remember, I think he was elected largely as an answer to the disaster of the Bush administration. But just because for the moment we have a center-left president, we should not be deluded in thinking this is a more or less permanently center-left country. It's not. It's not. And in order to stimulate the economy, and you could argue that the stimulus wasn't even large enough, the debt has shot up, and this becomes easy fodder for right-wing politicians to fan the flames of fear about the future of the country. The Tea Party movement has become the center of the Republican Party. It's the most animate, energized part of the Republican Party, and its ideology is the ideology of no, the ideology of resistance, and it's been very successful. And I think it's not lost on Obama that come this fall that they're going to lose a lot of seats in the Senate and in the House of Representatives.
The left as well has been critical of Obama.
That's true, but the left, in the end, when it comes to the election in the fall, its criticism of Obama will have far less effect, because where is it going to go? They're going to vote for Democrats by and large. Might be disappointed about certain things like Guantanamo or Afghanistan, but I think the left's criticism in the end, certainly when it comes to the election in the fall, will be less meaningful.
And what about the prospect of President Obama getting a second term? Do you see that as in doubt?
It's 2 years plus away, and as you know from being here long enough, a lot can happen in American politics very quickly. And if the economy is failing, then Obama's in deep trouble. That's the main factor, as it always is in elections recently. And I would say that he has to run against somebody. If he ends up running against Sarah Palin, I would think his odds are pretty good. If somebody emerges that can gain more of the center, as well as the right wing of the Republican Party, then Obama's going to have a tough time.
How has the presidency affected Obama? How has he changed in the office?
I haven't seen it. You know, a lot of times you see an American president age very quickly, change radically in some way. You look at Johnson during Vietnam, he aged radically. He grew markedly more depressed and withdrawn. I haven't seen that here.
What sustains him, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I first of all, I don't think Afghanistan is Vietnam, as serious as it is. And we have this notion that we will begin withdrawing troops at some rate fairly soon. I don't know what sustains him. It'd be too glib just to come up with some simple answer like family or God knows.
We hear a lot about this diffidence, this coolness of Obama,
Mm-hmm.
and what comes across in your book as well is he made himself into an incredibly disciplined person. I mean, he had incredible powers of focus. Are these the character traits, do you think?
I think it's the character traits of anybody who runs for this office. It's different than a prime ministership. As much ambition as that requires to make your way up within a party structure, the leap of crazy confidence that it takes for any American politician to thrust oneself forward before the entire American public, with all the power involved in the office, and assert oneself as uniquely qualified to lead the United States, and in some sense, a greater part of the world when it comes to foreign policy, requires a set of qualities that I doubt you and I are in possession of, because we're not nuts. And I think one of the
Is Obama nuts?
Well, one of the interesting things about Obama is that he's hip to that demand. He says at one point that it requires almost to be psychotic to run for president.
It's a little bit of a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, but look at American history and look at the history of power. Just again, I'm not saying crazy in all senses, but there is a psychic, an ego demand on the person to thrust yourself forward and run for the presidency of the entire country that is just deeply, deeply unusual and punishing and self-punishing.
And in terms of the great narrative of the office of the American presidency, where does Obama fit in? Is it the obvious point that he is the first African American to hold that office, or will he play some other role?
If the presidency ended today, the achievement would be the fact of his being an African American and being elected, and health care. Those would be the two. I think those would be the two enormous things.
And if it goes on?
Well, it's hard to say because, for example, we need an energy package desperately. We need to cut back on foreign oil consumption. We need an enormous transition in how we produce energy. We need to stop this planet from overheating, or we're going to be, or our grandchildren are going to be in very, very serious trouble. And yet we blithely go on because the White House perceives that it can get no Republican support and not much Democratic support in the Senate in particular, and the House of Representatives as well, and they give it up. They give it up. Because what the Republicans basically have said between now and the election, we refuse to give Obama any victories. They would rather see Obama lose than the earth gain. That's the pathetic state of politics. That's the cynical state of politics. It's not Obama, it would be with any president. That is a very, very sorry state of affairs, and I'm just picking one issue.
Well, on that rather downbeat note, I think we'll have to leave it there. David Remnick, thank you very much for talking to 1+1.
My pleasure.
Australian author Christos Tsiolkas is the author of the controversial novel The Slap, which by next week could be on the shortlist for the Booker Prize. The starting point of the book is a barbecue where a guest strikes someone else's unruly toddler. Christos Tsiolkas has been living in Scotland for the last few months, writing his next novel and taking a swipe at European fiction. London reporter